Hi everybody, welcome to another episode of Fun with Maps. I'm your host Dan Hanson. I bet if I asked people, any of you, what's a condominium, most of you would probably answer something like it's a building with a bunch of individually owned apartments or built houses or something like that. And that's what a condominium is. But I learned a new definition of the word stemming from international law for this episode of Fun with Maps. So, in that context, a condominium is a political territory, like a state or a border area or something, in which more than multiple sovereign powers formally agree to share equal dominion, like in the sense of sovereignty, and exercise their rights jointly without dividing that space into national zones. Now that sounds kind of legalistic, and let's give an example. For example, the continent of Antarctica, it's a kind of a condominium because, it's not governed by any one country. It's governed by 29 parties that have signed on to the Antarctic Treaty, and they have consulting status with the continent. So it's kind of it. And we'll look at Antarctica in a second. But a better example is a place called Pheasant Island. I love Pheasant Island. That's an uninhabited island in a river, the Bidassoa River, and it's between France and Spain, okay? So the whole territory of Pheasant Island is actually its enclave located within the borders of Spain. But here's what's fascinating about it. It's administered between the two nations, which makes it a condominium. But they alternate the administration. For 6 months of the year, France rules it. For 6 months, the other 6 months, Spain rules it. It's wild. So from February 1st to July 31st, naval commanders from Spain, San Sebastian, actually, they control it. They govern it. And then from August 1st to January 31st, the governors from Bayonne, France, govern it. That's wild. They split duties every year, 6 months at a time. So Pheasant Island is the world's smallest condominium. And as of January 2018, it's only like 660 feet long by 130 feet wide, and it's actually eroding, so it's getting smaller. You can actually, when the tide is low, walk to it from the Spanish side of the river. It's uninhabited, no one lives there, and you're not allowed to go there. Access is forbidden except when they have special, heritage open days or something. So it's a fascinating place. One other thing. There are no pheasants on Pheasant Island. So the whole idea of condominiums, some are historic, some are going on right now, these agreements, and some have been proposed for the future. So let's take a look at some of these interesting condominiums in this episode of Fun with Maps. So in this episode, we're going to look at some current condominiums, some historic ones from the past, and even take a look at some proposed future condominiums. So as we mentioned, here's Antarctica. You all know Antarctica down there. It's the 5th largest continent. It's slightly less than 1.5 times the size of the U.S. So Australia and Chile and Argentina claim some exclusive economic zone, EEZ, rights or similar over a lot of this extension seaward from their continental claims. But like the claims themselves, these zones are not accepted by other countries. So here's Antarctica, and we see all these groups are kind of sharing it. So here's a really good map of Antarctica. And we're going to cover Antarctica and many of these other condominiums in their own episode of Fun with Maps in the future. But we're looking at them now just because they are condominiums. So you can see here, Argentina and Chile with their claims there. And here's the Falkland Islands and Southern Ocean here, the Indian Ocean, all that, the Antarctic Circle. Okay. So that's a good map of Antarctica. So the next one we're going to look at is Sudan. So here's a map of Sudan. And, of course, now it's Sudan and South Sudan. So see this area here? This is the Abyei area. A-B-Y-E-I area. Okay? And it borders South Sudan and Sudan here. So in 2005, they had a comprehensive peace agreement and that's what ended the Second Sudanese Civil War. So they created with that agreement a special status. It's an administrative area known as the Abyei area, which is considered to simultaneously be part of the West Kordofan state and the Northern Bahr el Ghazi state. So, following the independence of South Sudan in 2011, the area effectively became a condominium between the Republic of South Sudan and the Republic of Sudan. So this little area here, that's a condominium between South Sudan and Sudan. So you can see in this map of South Sudan then, here's the area we're talking about, the Abyei area, the condominium there. Sudan was legally an Egyptian-British condominium from 1899 until 1956, but Egypt never really played a role. They had some administrators there. The UK, Great Britain, they made all the political decisions, and all the governors were British. So both the Egyptians and the Sudanese nationalists resented this, and they would later be disavowed by the Egyptian government. But it persisted because, if you remember, the UK actually had control over Egypt himself from like 1882 till at least 1936. So that's the situation there. But this is that area there we're talking about, the condominium, Abyei area. So in Central America, we have the Gulf of Fonseca. So here we've got Nicaragua, here we've got Honduras, and here we've got El Salvador, okay? And up here is Guatemala and Belize and all that. Here's the Caribbean, here's the North Pacific Ocean. But if you look down here, in this area here where the hand is, that's the Gulf of Fonseca, okay? And as you can see, it's got a border here in El Salvador, here in Honduras, and here in Nicaragua. So they exercise a tripartite condominium over parts of the Gulf of Fonseca and the territorial sea, outside of its mouth here. So these three have a condominium relationship on the Gulf of Fonseca here. So here's a satellite image of the Gulf of Fonseca from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, taken in 2001. And you can see, okay, here's the Gulf, and you've got Nicaragua and Honduras and El Salvador, and they all share this. This is a condominium, as we've explained. So also in the Americas, we have a maritime condominium called the Joint Regime Area in the Caribbean Sea. There's a mutual agreement. And so here we have Colombia, all right? And up here we have Jamaica, okay? So in this area there, their EEZ would overlap, but they've came up with this condominium. They have this agreement there. It's a maritime condominium to share some of this sea here. So here's Jamaica, here's Colombia, and they're sharing this. This is the Joint Regime Area. And, a lot of these are to divide oil or fisheries or other resources, but this doesn't seem to be the case for this one. So Andorra is very interesting, and we'll probably look at the map of Andorra by itself sometime, but it's a sovereign, landlocked microstate on the Iberian Peninsula. It's in the Eastern Pyrenees Mountains, so it's bordered by France here to the north, and it's bordered by Spain here to the south. And you can see here's the Pyrenees coming right through it here. It's the sixth smallest state in Europe, and Andorra is the 16th smallest country in the world. It's only 181 square miles. That's about 2.5 times the size of Washington, D.C. Okay, let's look at that. So this map shows, here's Maryland, Virginia, Washington, D.C., and if you put Andorra here in the orangish on top of it, you'd see the size. So it's about 2.5 times the size of Washington, D.C., the whole country. It's also small in population. It's the 11th smallest by population. It's got less than 80,000 people. Okay, so its capital, Andorra la Vella, is the highest capital city in Europe. So under French law, Andorra was once considered to be French-Spanish condominium, although it's more commonly classified as a co-principality because it Andorra is itself a sovereign state. It's not a possession of, of one of the foreign powers. But the position of head of state is shared by two foreigners, one of whom is the president of France, the other is the Bishop of Urgell in Spain. So that's what makes it a condominium. You see another aspect of that. So if you got France up here, Italy, here's the Mediterranean Sea, here's Spain. Andorra is right in here. The Pyrenees extend here from the Bay of Biscay all the way to the Gulf of Lyon, Lyon or Lion, however, in the east here. So it's along here, and you can see how small it is. This little patch here on the border of France and Spain, that's Andorra. So historically, we've had some very famous condominiums. For example, after World War II, the Allies occupied Germany, which is also East Germany, West Berlin. So the Allied Control Council controlled that area, and that council was representatives of France, the Soviet Union, United States, and United Kingdom, and they occupied that from 1945 until 1990. And then another famous one is Cyprus. Here's a map of Cyprus in 1573. Okay, historic map. So back in 688, the Byzantine emperor and the Umayyad Caliph, they had an agreement, and it was really unprecedented at the time. They established a condominium, and the concept didn't really exist yet, so you can say they invented it. And they established a condominium over Cyprus here, and the collected taxes from the island were divided equally between the two of them. Okay, and this arrangement lasted for about 300 years, even though they were fighting back and forth, on the mainlands. But they kept this condominium arrangement, maybe the first ever, with the two of them there. So here's a good map of Cyprus itself, and Cyprus is split here. There's a UN buffer zone. Here's a Turkish Cypriot administered area. Here's the area controlled by the Cyprus government and the Greek Cypriot area. We'll have to do a separate episode of Fun with Maps on Cyprus sometimes, because it's pretty fascinating. So the condominium of Bosnia and Herzegovina was actually jointly ruled by Austria and Hungary between 1908 and 1918, while both countries were part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. So today we have Montenegro and Serbia and Croatia over there, and this is Bosnia and Herzegovina. Not easy to say, Bosnia and Herzegovina. But back for those 10 years there, while they were part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, they were a condominium and jointly ruled by Austria and Hungary. And let's take a look at Croatia here too. So here we see Croatia. We're just at Bosnia here. Here's Croatia, Hungary, Slovenia, Austria, Serbia, Montenegro, the Adriatic, Italy, all that. During World War II, from 1941 to 1943, Croatia was a military condominium, and it was shared by Nazi Germany and Fascist Italy until 1943. Now, in 1943, Italy split between the pro-Allied Kingdom of Italy under the King and the pro-Axis leaning Italian Social Republic under Benito Mussolini. But for those few years there, Croatia was a condominium. And it's not just Europe or Asia or Oceania. Here's the Oregon country. This was a condominium. It was an Anglo-American condominium from 1818 until 1846. So here's the Oregon Trail, okay, and coming along the states here. But this area here was the Oregon country, and now we know it as the Pacific Northwest of the United States and British Columbia of Canada. But from those 30 or so years, this was a condominium between the UK and the America. So now we're back at Oceania, and you can see here's Southeast Asia, here's Australia, here's New Zealand, and this little square here it used to be called New Hebrides, okay, but it was officially the New Hebrides Condominium. That was the colonial name for this group of islands here in the South Pacific. Now it's called Vanuatu, Okay, there's about 80 islands, about 65 of them are inhabited. The whole thing total is about the size of Connecticut, the state of Connecticut. So in the 18th century, after Captain James Cook visited, both the British and French colonized it. So here's the Solomon Islands up here. Here's the New Hebrides or Vanuatu here, New Caledonia. You know, all of this right in here, all the islands of the New Hebrides. So the French and English eventually signed an agreement making the islands a condominium. It divided it into two separate communities, one English, one French. That continued even after independence, and it got crazy because schools would teach in either one language or the other. They'd have different political parties, and this condominium lasted from 1906 until 1980, when New Hebrides gained its independence as a Republic of Vanuatu. So this was a rare one. There were actually three separate governments under this condominium: the French, the British, and they had a joint administration that was partially elected after 1975. But what got confusing was local people could choose whether to be tried under the English common law or the French civil law. Visitors could choose which immigration rules to enter under. Nationals of one country could set up corporations under the laws of the other. And you had these two legal systems, the French and the British, but a third native court existed to handle cases involving their local Melanesian law. They had two prison systems, two court systems, two police forces. They were in theory united, but they had two chiefs and different uniforms, and each group alternated their duties and assignments. So it was really hard to deal with. There's a great NASA photo. They took a satellite photo. Okay, so here we are in Vanuatu, and this is one of the this is the Gua volcano in 2010, and you could see this thick white steam-rich plume shooting up from that volcano. That's just, to me, that's a fantastic picture. Here's another famous one. So you've heard of Togo. Togoland was a German protectorate. So here's Africa. Here's Togo right now in the green. Okay, so World War I breaks out, 1914, and Togoland was quickly invaded and overrun by British and French forces, and they placed it under military rule. Okay, so in 1916, the territory was divided into separate British and French administrative zones, and they formalized this in 1922, and they created British Togoland and French Togoland. So what happened was, here's today, here's Togo, here's the Bight of Benin here. So British Togoland joined the Gold Coast, and the Gold Coast is present day Ghana. Okay, in 1956 British Togoland joined what we now call Ghana, and French Togoland became this nation of Togo. So this is the French, this is the British. So let's do one more here. You know, one of the more recent episodes of Fun with Maps was on Greenland. Okay, and here's Canada up here in the Baffin Bay, and we saw this, Iceland, and here's Europe. So it's split between Greenland here, I mean split right in the middle, and Canada here in the form of Ellesmere Island. Okay, right in the middle there. The island itself is barren and uninhabited. It's only about a half a square mile, but for years there was a border dispute between Greenland, well, Denmark and Greenland, and Canada, the so-called Whiskey War between the two of them. And Hans Island is the smallest of the three islands in this Kennedy Channel off the coast here. There's also Franklin Island and Crozier Island. So the strait at this point is just 22 miles wide. So it is in the territorial waters of both Canada and Denmark, or Greenland. This June, in June 2022, up until then, it was claimed by both Canada and Denmark. And in June 2022, both countries agreed to split the disputed island roughly in half. So, you know, it's uninhabited. It's only a half a mile. It's right between them. There's no real value to it and stuff. They decided this year, I think it's pretty smart myself, to just split it roughly in half and move on. So there are a lot of other condominiums, but not for this episode. So there have been and are a lot of condominiums, but new ones are always being proposed. And, in 2019, the Prime Minister of Australia proposed to a few of the islands around them, Tuvalu and Kiribati and Nauru, that maybe they should have some kind of condominium arrangement because of changes in the climate and how things were shifting. He offered them Australian citizenship for their people and relocation to Australian territories in exchange for Australia's ownership of their territorial seas and exclusive economic zones and fisheries and all. And in 2001, the British government actually proposed to Spain a proposal for joint sovereignty, a condominium agreement for Gibraltar. But the Gibraltar people preemptively poo-pooed that and voted it down in a referendum in 2002. There have been proposals for condominiums with Israel and Palestine. There'd be a state of Israel, there'd be a state of Palestine, and then there'd be a condominium sharing sovereignty over part or all of Jerusalem. That hasn't come about either. And then even Northern Ireland, that's been proposed in 1984, a joint UK and Irish sovereignty of Northern Ireland, to help with the troubles there. And then we had the Good Friday Agreement, which put things on hold for a while. But back in, when Brexit came around, the issue was raised again in 2017, and so on. So this idea of condominiums are not going away. They've been there, they're here now, and they're still proposing them. So I don't think I'll ever hear the word condominium again and just think of those shared buildings, the buildings with the shared units inside. So I hope you like this episode of Fun with Maps. It's a little different. If so, please click like and subscribe and tell your friends, all that good stuff. Until next time, I'm your host, Dan Hanson, and keep on having fun with maps.